it's not just in this economy.
Everyone's oppressed.
I'm oppressed. Everyone's oppressed. But it's really about dealing with providing support for families. Because again, whether you are a rich family or a poor family or an in-between family, you care about good educational options. I think that the moms on the Hill, for example, are just as concerned about whether or not they're going to be good middle school options when their children graduate from their elementary school as any other parent would be concerned about that. I think that the parent who is struggling to find a place to live is concerned about making certain that they have, a good environment in order to ensure that there's a good roof over their head. I mean, so it's not this isn't about, just poor people or the least among us. What I suggested is that we've got to make certain that we're looking at how to grow families and how to uplift families in a way that's meaningful, and getting everyone to care about that, no matter what means they have currently. Mm-hmm. Because if we don't have everyone concerned about that and everyone isn't engaged in the struggle to uplift everyone, then we're working counter to one another.
Okay. Well, the concern that you did express had something to do with crime. You mentioned that earlier. And you talked about how that needs to be addressed. And then you talked about how you were a victim of a crime and that you'd like to obviously address what causes people to want to break into cars and to wield guns. And we still have I believe we still have a law in the books that says that guns are illegal to possess in district. I don't know how much longer that's going to keep. So a couple of the hot buttons, gun laws in D.C., gay marriage, taxes as usual, improprieties, spending money where you shouldn't, making backroom deals, all those kinds of things. The baseball stadium, do we need it? Is it working out? How do you handle these issues differently from the folks that are in power right now? Is there a Kelvin Robinson principle that we can look at? Is there a guidebook? I mean, how do we know, besides the fact that, you're obviously a successful guy, you got a great family, beautiful home, and you're out there and you're meeting people, but what's really going to be the difference when you take office that is going to be palpable to the point where folks are going to say, not only do we want you in the Ward 6 seat, but we may consider you for other things. Not that you say you have any other aspirate, right?
Right. Look, I think the most important thing that I can do is continue to engage folks in the process. Again, I think that what's happened is there's been I'm elected, I know best, and I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. And
who's that are you talking about?
In particular? Well, I think it's a little bit of all of them. I think it's part of what this current ward council member has suffered from. I think it is also part of what our mayor has suffered from, and certain members of the council. And I think it's a very dangerous route for us to go, to think that somehow once we're elected we know all, we can do all. And instead what you'll see from me is me reaching back to the community saying, hey guys, I'm not in this thing by myself. It's going to require all of us to be elected. And what I tell folks when I go to the door is, listen, don't just complain about your council member or this person or that person. Once I'm elected, you've got to be there with me to make certain these things get done. So what you're going to see from me is a heightened level of engagement around issues of concern to this community. That means that when we want to talk about envisioning something different for RFK or Reservation 13 or Southwest Waterfront Development, we're going to have robust community discussions about it, and so that everybody will have an opportunity to have a say. And if we're talking about transportation issues, we're going to bring in communities that otherwise would not be part of the discussion, and maybe, not maybe, but for sure host meetings in areas where currently there are no meetings being held and nobody ever sees a community discussion.
Can you give me an example of that? Not that I
Well,
don't know, but what would be an example?
Well, for example, I mean, one of the things that folks we've been wrestling with in 6A is whether or not there's a conversion of 17th Street and 19th Street to two-way. Maybe a very good idea, but there have been certain parts of the community, the Rosedale community in particular, that really did not feel that they were engaged in the discussion. Meetings weren't held on the other side of C Street, near the upper northeast quadrant, near Benning Road. Instead of having those meetings down on Capitol Hill, maybe you might want to have those meetings in that community, because that's a part of the community that will also be affected, so that those folks might have a voice in whether or not it makes sense to do that conversion. Sounds like a small thing to some, but for many in that community, around a whole lot of discussions that happen in this ward, they feel like they've been left out. They've not been invited, or they hear about it after the decisions have already been made, and somehow their opinions don't matter. I want to immediately resolve that. We won't be able to solve every issue through that process, but my goodness, we ought to struggle to figure out a way to engage as many people in the conversations as possible.
Okay. There seems to be a correlation between what is referred to as upscale neighborhoods and civic participation. That is to say that the implication, and sometimes the truth, is that folks who are in lower income neighborhoods tend to be less engaged and tend to be somewhat apathetic about what goes on, because they assume that decisions have already made and they can't overcome those decisions. So how do you bring people out, like you said, and get them more involved? Do you go directly into those neighborhoods that have been known for being sort of complacent and say, look, you need to participate in this. I'm going to bring you to, I'll drive you there if I need to. How do you motivate them?
Again, I say you meet people where they are, and go to places where they congregate. It may be at that community church, or at the school, or other location. I've always advocated for making schools neighborhood centers, where we can bring people together at those locations into the school setting that they're accustomed to taking their children to, on a day-to-day basis. But you got to meet people where they are, and hold meetings in unusual places in order to get their voices heard. Sometimes we just can't have it convenient for us. Those of us who have the internet capability and the ability to communicate on social media and other kind of ways that folks with less means have. We got to meet people where they are.
Okay, but we do have now libraries. And what's the library situation in some of the neighborhoods that we're talking about?
Goodness, I mean, we've got to do a better job of re-looking at the distribution of those libraries. We had a little kiosk closed, the R.L. Christian Library that closed, and it was really the last library option to that part of the community, northeast part of the community, and so part of the redo of the Rosedale Community Center was to encourage for a library use there. We were hoping that a co-located library could be part of the recreation center, and so in the discussions, much wrangling, we were able to at least get a library presence there. How robust it will be, that's yet to be seen yet in terms of the ultimate design and use of the facility. But it's important to have libraries also be those centers of learning and opportunity for folks to come together and congregate. But again, let's not keep looking at just government facilities. There are other places where these things could be held, and we ought to be looking at trying to do that.